sponsored by Waris Food Stores.
نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد رسوله النبي الأمين المكين الحنين الكريم الرؤوف الرحيم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وذكر فإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون صدق الله العظيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وأصحاب سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. You are listening to Revive 94.0 FM, and I welcome the listeners on Revive 94.0 FM and all the viewers around the world watching this live broadcast on Facebook and YouTube. You are here with your host Abu Adam Ahmad al-Shiraazi. We are in the blessed month of Ramadan, and today my lecture will be about divine pleasure, the ultimate ideal. And I have taken excerpts from the book Divine Pleasure by Shaykh al-Islam Dr. Muhammad Tahir al-Qadri. I have recited to you from Surah number 55, verse number 57, Surah Zariyat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says to us, keep on exhorting, for exhortation benefits the believers. I have created men and jinn that they may worship me. I desire no financial support from them, and I do not desire that they should feed me. So, when we take a study of the Holy Quran, it reveals the ideal and purpose of an individual existence is acquisition of the highest form of moral excellence. So the verse that I have recited to you, the verse expressed the object of human life and the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation with remarkable clarity. Allah doesn't want anything from us. We should be asking from Allah all the time. And during this month of Ramadan, in this pandemic crisis, in this corona virus that we are all in the midst of, we should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins, to put us on the right way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completely independent of human limitations. He is beyond human cravings and desires. In fact, there is no gap between Allah's wish and Allah's fulfillment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't need human help in any way, shape or form. Again, the next verse in Surah Zariyat, verse number 58, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us that He is the great sustainer, He is the Lord of power, and He is the strong one. Now, the role of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is active in every sense, and the role of man is passive. And we need to understand that. Allah is the strongest. There is no other thing in this universe, in this planet, in this world, which is stronger than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's sensible to conclude that the creation of mankind is a completion of divine attributes, or that the revelation of the divine self is in some way dependent and contingent on the creation of man. Again, the Quran tells us the word dhikra in the context of purpose of human creation, which means advice. فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Surah Zariyat, verse number 55. Surely this advice or a sense of surrender shall benefit the believers. And if we as humans are aware of the purpose of our creation and we adopt the awareness as the basis of our ideal, then we can derive the maximum benefit out of this awareness and scale those highs of moral sublimity which are made accessible to us on account of our intensified awareness. So, we take the word ibadat, and basically we reduce the word ibadat, worship, you can call it, to the fundamentals of prayer, of pilgrimage, of charity, of zakat, of fasting, etc. And we reduce the worship just to these things. This is a very limited view. The Quran itself, in fact, has declared that a complete surrender and submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the exclusive purpose of us being human, of human creation. So if ibadat only meant prayer, it is only obligatory 5 times a day on us. The fard prayer is only obligatory 5 times a day on us, and it does not affect the rest of the day. So this creates the undesirable impression that out of 24 hours in a day and night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has only reserved a few moments for us to worship Him, during which the man can achieve the object of his life, and we have given him complete liberty so that he can do what he likes. So the interpretation of that creates a lopsided affair, which actually hardly reflects the wisdom of our Lord, of our Creator, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, for instance, if fasting was just ibadat, and this is for only the month of Ramadan comes once every year, so 1 month. So what do we do for the rest of the 11 months? So it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has only made 1 month for us to worship Him? No, absolutely not. Again, that would reflect on bad planning of the Creator. So, the next thing is zakat, charity. If ibadat was just reduced to charity, to zakat, zakat is only obligatory once in a year. So when the whole cycle of your savings has gone round in a year, then the zakat is applicable on it. So does that mean that worship is only applicable once a year? Of course not. So the thing is, and then let's take the last one, the pilgrimage. If ibadat is only pilgrimage, well, Hajj is only fard once in your lifetime. Does that mean that we're exempted for the rest of our lives because we have been for Hajj once in our lifetimes? Again, it implies divine discrimination between the rich and the poor on the basis of their financial capability only. So this type of discrimination indicates a superficial and partial intelligence, and therefore it reflects adversely on the magnanimous and impartial nature of the divine mentality. The fact is that all noble and virtuous acts of human beings are added to the fundamentals of Islam, and our total aggregate fails to explain the diversity and complexity of life. We as human, we eat, we drink, we sleep, we keep away, we marry, we raise children, we take up some profession or vocation in life, we deal with a large number of issues and problems in the course of our short existence because our life is really short. All of these acts cannot be included among ibadat. But these acts do not negate the Islamic injunctions either. They are in strict conformity to the dictates of Islam. Islam is a religion of positive values. It expects its adherents to lead normal lives like other human beings and to actively engage themselves in the basic affairs of the world as well. Now, an ideal that fades in and out is no ideal. It is an imitation of an ideal. A true ideal is a point of steady reference and a constant source of illumination and consolation. Therefore, if we adhere to the narrow interpretation that has taken roots in the minds of many Muslims, we shall be the victims of a fundamental contradiction which is neither in the interests of Muslims nor in the interest of propagation of the message of Islam. So what is the correct conception of ibadat? The only way to remove a sense and complication is to present a comprehensive and inclusive view of true form of prayer and guidance and righteousness that may encompass the totality of human life, which has been specified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran itself. I said to you in many lectures that a lot of the answers to our questions are in the Holy Quran. The Quran tells us, Surah Baqarah, verse number 177. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, He says, religious righteousness of true form, of true prayer, is not that you turn your faces to the east or to the west, but truly righteous are those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who believe in the last day, who believe in the angels, who believe in the books, and believe in the prophets, and spend their wealth in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for love of Him, on the kindred, and the orphans, and the needy, and the wayfarers, and those who ask for procuring the freedom of captives, who observe prayer and pay the zakat, and whenever they make a promise they carry it out, and are steadfast in adversity under affliction and in battle. It is those who are proved faithful, and it is those who are righteous. So this is the correct concept of worship. Now, let's talk about Islam. Doesn't accept any views of righteousness or philosophy of life which excludes the practical life of a man from its area or application. On the other hand, Islam actually posits a very broad view of human life that recognizes all of its speculative and practical aspects. Islamic conception of the right mode of submission and righteousness includes the following attributes which I'm going to tell you now. The first one are the strength of convictions. It includes a clear and strong belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the last day, the day of judgment, the angels, the revealed books, and the messengers and prophets of Allah. The second thing is the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is confirmed by deeds of public welfare, deep concern for mankind, financial sacrifice for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, and by allied acts of virtue. The third thing is financial sacrifice. Financial sacrifice is a righteous person who spends his money on his indigent relatives, the orphans and the needy, the poor and the deprived, to procure the freedom and the financial stability and prosperity of those who are bound in the chains of slavery and captivity. The fourth thing is strength of action. A righteous person should observe the fundamentals of Islam, for argument's sake, prayer and fasting, etc., and being punctual with these. The fourth thing is the fulfillment of promise. One should carry out the promises he makes both in letter and spirit, and should stick to his stand with steadfast determination. The sixth thing, is patience and steadiness. One should face adversity patiently and uncomplainingly, and show steadfastness whenever we are in trouble or otherwise cornered. For instance, in this current crisis, we should be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have a home, we have shelter, we have food, we have drink, we have everything. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our iman and our faith should be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will take this away from us at some time. And the final thing is self-defense. In order to defend the truth, we should not flinch from any sacrifice. And we should face the most bitter ordeals resolutely and stay in defense. Now, all of these attributes are the forms of ingredients, and they constitute elements, and the aggregate of these ingredients is called righteousness or true form of prayer. So let's talk about the highest form of excellence. The highest form of excellence is the acquisition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, divine pleasure. Moral excellence or perfection is the ideal of individual human life, and condition of perfection is achieved through complete surrender to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so we should take the conclusion that which is easily derived from the verse وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى. And man should, for love of the Lord, spend his money on relatives, the orphans and other people. So after faith, sacrifice and action, which are stressed in this verse, the incentive for both sacrifice and action is for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's the Quran? What is the Quran and the ideal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure? As I've also already stated to you, the highest form of moral perfection is the attainments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran, it's intended to reinforce and illustrate the fact in the light of the verses of the Holy Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Tawbah, verse number 72, وَرِضْوَانٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. And the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest of all blessings. Moreover, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells again in Surah Tawbah, verses number 20 to 21, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ أَعْظَمُ دَرَجَةً عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَائِزُونَ يُبَشِّرُهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِّنْهُ وَرِضْوَانٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran that those who believed and have migrated and struggled in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their belongings and their persons have the highest stature in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is they who shall triumph. Their Lord gives them glad tidings of mercy from Him. And furthermore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises those who face ordeals of life for the love and pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran again. He says, الَّذِينَ أُخْرِجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِهِمْ وَأَمْوَالِهِمْ يَبْتَغُونَ فَضْلًا مِنَ اللَّهِ وَرِضْوَانًا وَيَنْصُرُونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولُهُ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those who have been driven out from their homes and from their possession and seek Allah's grace and His pleasure and His mercy and constantly help the cause of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, these are the sincere in faith. This is from Surah Al-Hashr, verse number 8. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Baqarah, verse number 207. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ رَءُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. And those who dedicate themselves to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is most compassionate towards such devoted person. And there are many verses in the Holy Quran like this. The attainment of divine pleasure is declared by Quran to be the greatest triumph in human life. Al-Maidah, Surah Al-Maidah, verse number 119. Radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. Allah is pleased with them and they are well pleased with Him. That is indeed the supreme triumph. Surah Al-Fath, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ. Allah was indeed well pleased with the believers who swore allegiance to who? Under the tree. So each act of us as believers is dedicated to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. Now when we study the Holy Quran, the purpose and ideal of human life is the acquisition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's grace. So therefore, as believers, whatever we do, we should do it for the pleasure of Allah. We do not desire any reward except the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. Because to entertain any other reward is a form of greed. Umayyah inflicted several tortures on Hazrat Bilal Habshi radiallahu ta'ala an to turn him back from Islam. Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala an paid Umayyah a heavy price for the freedom of Hazrat Bilal radiallahu ta'ala an. But once he bought him, he freed him immediately. And the Quran actually appreciated this noble act. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sent down a revelation. وَمَا لِأَحَدٍ عِنْدَهُ مِنْ نِعْمَةٍ تُجْزَى إِلَّا ابْتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ رَبِّهِ الْأَعْلَى وَلَسَوْفَ يَرْضَى. Surah Al-Layl. He owes no favor to anyone, which is to be repaid. His purpose being only to win the pleasure of his Lord, the Most High, and surely his Lord will be well pleased with him. So we should try to attain everything with trying to get the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the ideal of Allah's pleasure is the criterion of us believers, us as believers, friendship and enmity. I have given you lots of verses of the Holy Quran. We should make friends for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shaykh al-Islam Dr. Muhammad Tahir al-Qadri always tells us, he says to us that make friends of those people who will help you in the hereafter, who will be there for you in a time of need, who will make the dua for you, who will make prayer for you, who will help you. We should always try to do that kind of thing. So this is trying to obtain the divine pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A poet expresses this. He says, I was neither aware when I kneeled, nor was I aware when I prostrated. The bend of my body during prayer was the only stoop of my soul in search of a vision of your footprints. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us again and again in the Holy Quran, رِجَالًا لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْعٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Surah An-Nur, Verse number 38. There are people whom neither trade nor traffic beguiles from the reverence of Allah. Each gesture that people make and each word that they utter is an act for remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are so deeply absorbed in their purpose and ideal that they are called the very objectified ideal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are transformed on account, and their total immersion in the ideal into visible expressions and illustrations of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when a man is totally dedicated to the ideal, he becomes the transformed ideal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Holy Quran, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. Surah Al-Imran, verse number 31. Tell them, if you love Allah and then follow me, as a result, Allah will love you. So my dear listeners and my dear viewers, today we have spoken about divine pleasure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever merciful, ever giving. The final verse that I will say to you today is from Surah Al-Maidah. قَدْ جَاءَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ نُورٌ وَكِتَابٌ مُبِينٌ يَهْدِي بِهِ اللَّهُ مَنِ اتَّبَعَ رِضْوَانَهُ سُبُلَ السَّلَامِ وَيُخْرِجُهُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ بِإِذْنِهِ وَيَهْدِيهِمْ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. There has come to you indeed from Allah a light and clear book. It guides those who seek His pleasure along the paths of peace and leads them out of every kind of darkness into the light or right awareness by His will, and guides them to the right path or the path of security. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us on the straight path, on the path of Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim. Inshallah, I will be giving you a talk on Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim on the night of Laylatul Qadr, the straight path. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us of those people who gain His pleasure, divine pleasure, and makes us into those people who remember Him at all times with all our words and our actions. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ وَبَرَكَاتُهُ. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم أنت السلام منك السلام وإليك يرجع السلام. حينا ربنا بالسلام وأدخلنا الجنة كدار السلام. تباركت ربنا وتعاليت وتعزمت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا عذاب الحشر وقنا عذاب الميزان. اللهم ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار بحرمة سيد الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا ربنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم يا مؤمن يا حفيظ يا لطيف يا حي يا قيوم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم عافني في بدني، اللهم عافني بسمعي، اللهم عافني في بصري، لا إله إلا أنت. اللهم اغفر لنا قبل الموت وارحمنا عند الموت ولا تعذبنا بعد الموت ولا تحاسبنا يوم القيامة إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم إني لك صمت وبك أمنت وعليك توكلت وعلى رزقك أفطرت. وصلى الله تعالى على حبيبه سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأهل بيته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعليك توكلت وعلى رزقك أفطرت. وصلى الله تعالى على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله الصلاة في بيوتكم الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله في الأولين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه في الآخرين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت سيدنا ومولانا محمد الوسيلة والفضيلة والدرجة الرفيعة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته وارزقنا شفاعته يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
This Iftari is sponsored by Waris Food Stores.